Maybe. Let's see. Let me get to YouTube here. And we will find out for sure. Okay. Hold on. Everything is running slow today. I don't know why. Okay, hold on. Still checking. Oh, why? Why does my computer do this? Why do I do this? Why does this always go like this every single week? I don't know. I don't know. Um okay, I think I figured it out. I think we're here and let's see. Okay. Let's see. It looks like Shannon's here, Practical Dreamers here, Doug is here. G3 Brenda is here. Hello, hello, everybody. M. Olson is here, and she's got a, or he, I'm not sure what gender M. Olson is, but has a question right out of the gate. Overcoming Understanding is here. Pepper is here. Hi, Pepper. Candy's here. So let's see. I'm going to just start with Overcoming Understanding says, my connection for some reason is never good for these live streams, so I don't know how long I'll stay. That's so interesting. I don't know if anybody else is having that issue or kind of what's going on. Dave Kohler is here. Hi, Dave. Um, let's see. Who else is here? Okay. We've got about 20 people here so far, which is really cool. And let's see. I was going. Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry, my eye just is watering. Okay. M. Olson says, hi, Dana. Here's my question. Has anyone ever had experience with a narcissist where they don't blame you for what they did wrong? Um, if they are emotionally manipulative, then they're always emotionally manipulative. So they might not blame you right out of the gate for what they've done wrong, but there's a reason. There's always a hidden agenda. There's always some sort of motive for everything that they're doing. So, um, I don't, Steve didn't really blame me, like outright blame me for stuff. He lied. Like he just lied. He said his whole reason for everything happening the way that it did was, well, he had told me that his ex-wife had cancer, and then he told me he really missed his son and that's why he had to move. And then he told me at one point that he was, after with the truth began coming out, that he was hearing voices. um that was like the last crazy excuse that I heard. Then he actually had checked himself into rehab right after he broke up and like left me in a lurch. We just signed a lease on a place. I had no job. I had, bought him a truck with I thought I was buying us a truck. So I really, put myself into this financial bind. When he left, he had checked himself into rehab and was saying he was an alcoholic and had this issue with cocaine and like all this stuff. And then it turned out that everything began unraveling. And it turns out he was still married, that his divorce didn't go through, and that he'd been talking to his ex-wife the whole time. And it was just like Lifetime TV movie, Jerry Springer level of like drama and nonsense. And he didn't ever really blame me for any of it, but he had no shortage of excuses as to why it wasn't his fault either. So, they lie, and if a person lies and manipulates, like that's their character, that's what they do. So just because they're not acting squirrely in one way doesn't mean that they're like not squirrely. Okay, Doug says I wrote a bunch of stuff, but you need to scroll up if it's there. So Doug, let me see. Let's see. Oh, you did type a lot. Okay. Okay. Doug says, okay, my moderator crescent wrench is gone. No, it's not. It's still there. You are still a moderator. Sorry. Sorry to put you to work when you're here for to give and get support, but yeah, you're a moderator. And Doug says, I've saved a link to my favorites so I can show up here and chat early. Very cool. And normally I get here early. Um, it was just a series of computer things. My software was updating. Of course, right? Like it has to do it during my live stream. It can't do it any other time when I have my computer on, but that's Murphy's Law, right? Um, Doug says, so this week after the last chat has been quiet on the family front. No emails, even from the lawyer, and he promised answers on Tuesday, which would be yesterday. It's been a nice reprieve from everything. I woke up this morning at 4 a.m., so I'm a little tired, but I went to the barber shop and got my hair down. I made a video of it just now if anyone wants to take a look. I bet all my typing is going to waste when the stream starts, but maybe not. Um, Dana, I hope you have a wonderful week and are doing excellent. Thank you. Sending you light and love as always. Namaste. I honor the divine in all of us and all things. So, yeah, Doug, I don't show any links to anything, or I'm not links, but you were talking about a video that you'd made. If you want to post a link to that in the chat, go for it. And let's see how. Let's see. G3 Brenda says, I was married to a narcissist for 20 years, 3 years happily divorced. Brenda, I'm so glad that you mentioned that because there's a lot of people that come on here and they will say, they'll say, I've been married for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. It's too late for me. It's too late for me, but maybe somebody else can learn from my mistakes. And it's so great to hear from somebody who's been married to a narcissist for 20 years and who says, you know what, I've been divorced for 3 years and it's been 3 glorious years of freedom. Because I think people need to hear that life can go on. Life not only can go on, but it can be even better than before. And it just kind of gives them that reassurance that, you know, you can move forward. You can heal from this. Happiness and healing and health is totally possible after these things end. So I'm really glad that you shared that with us. So thank you for that. M. Olson says, I am a woman. Hi, Dana. You're awesome. Well, hey. Hi, M. Olson. Thank you for saying that. Hey, Cecilia's here. Hi, Cecilia. Peace Pom Pom is here. We've got Ange D is here. Practical Dreamer, I already said. But welcome again, Practical Dreamer. And M. Olson says, our stories are very similar, and mine was sleeping with like 20 or 30 women behind my back. And I found the pictures and videos, and he always said he didn't know why he did it. Yeah, that's convenient, right? Like, yeah, it's frustrating when there's no sense of accountability for their actions. Overcoming Understanding says, mine used to fake admit that he was a terrible boyfriend and that it wasn't my fault. He said I was too nice and he didn't deserve it. So yes, I have heard this from many people before. I think I want to say Steve had made a similar comment to me as well at the tail end. I don't really I like it's all kind of a blur, but it's the same kind of thing of they somehow spin it to where they're a victim of themselves. It's sort of like, well, I'm a tortured soul and you deserve so much better. And really they're not saying that because they mean it, because narcissists, they're abusive people in general. Their whole goal is to get power and control over other people. That is their primary driver. It's what they do. Period. End of story. And so whenever they open their mouths and talk, everything they do, all of their thoughts and feelings and actions are all about getting power and control over other people and over other situations. And that's all part of it. So it's this whole, when I hear that, when they're like, well, I just don't deserve you, you're so fantastic, I always hear, ooh, they're setting you up for a Hoover. Like that's what that's about, because then they're going to come back down the road and it's going to be this whole kind of, hat in hand, pity me, I just don't deserve you. But maybe, given enough time or therapy or love or rehab, that we could make things work. And so, you know, especially those of us that are on the more codependent side of the spectrum, we have this pattern of kind of sinking ourselves so that somebody else may swim. And so if we hear about this person that we really love and that we really care for, feels like that we don't deserve them, then that kind of triggers this thing within us where it's like, no, 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 let me prove to you that you see that you do deserve me. And so then it kind of creates this weird spiral where we are trying to prove to them, kind of prove our worth and that they're worthy, and really it's just keeping us in this cycle of abuse. It's really, really dysfunctional. So Pepper says the stories are so similar, it's scary, right? They really, really are. Um, Pepper goes on to say, I've had the Steve Wilkos show, and Dr. Phil contact me to go on their show. Ugh, insane, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense that you know that they would want to have kind of these dysfunctional relationships on their show, but I would just caution. I would only do something like that if you don't feel like it would be putting yourself in at risk in any way, shape, or form, like either with your safety or your sanity. So, M. Olson asks another great question. She says, do you know if there is some type of pattern in the types of professions that a narcissist will have? I'm just curious. Well, narcissists, because they're very driven for power and control, and they tend to turn a lot of people off to them, they tend to be self-employed. Because they have a hard time working for other people. They tend to, excuse me, be driven towards professions where they have power and control. So like CEO, CFO, kind of, top, power and control type doctors. I think you could probably make the case that there's a lot of narcissists that are doctors. The high achieving narcissists do tend to be really top of their field. Um, I know a lot of therapists that I would say are narcissists, which is kind of interesting because a lot of codependent people tend to be more of like the caregiver type fields, like nurses, teachers, social workers, therapists tend to be a lot more on the codependent side of the spectrum. But there's a lot of narcissists that are also, especially in like the therapy type fields. And I think it's because, with therapy is a person goes in there opening themselves completely to another human being, and they very readily accept the therapist's perception of reality as gospel truth. And that can be really, really dangerous if you have a therapist who's an emotional manipulator, or a therapist who doesn't have any emotional insight into their own issues and they're projecting them onto the client. So yeah, so that would be my guess as far as professions that, probably professors. as well. Any type of like high ego type profession, I think you're going to get narcissists attracted to it. High status kind of professions. Um, Adrian is here. Hi, Adrian. Let's see. Shannon is here and says, "Isn't it silly how I'll have these moments where I try to convince myself that maybe he's not a narcissist and maybe I'm looking at him wrong?" You know, Shannon, in Hot Potato's here, and she says, "I think we all went through that," and I would agree. I think we all do, and this is one of the main reasons that I encourage people to set aside the label of narcissist, because I see this time and time again. I got caught up in it as well. It's I think a label feels so permanent, and people tend to get caught up in wondering, well, is he really, does he really have like a personality disorder, or is he just a selfish jerk? And really, at the end of the day, neither one of those is workable. So either he or she is a narcissist, or they're a selfish jerk with a very low emotional, like emotional kind of EQ type thing, where they're very resistant to change. So either way, it's not going to work. And so I encourage people to look at the behavior instead of looking at the label. Because once you see the behavior as problematic, then it's easier to walk away from it versus staying in there thinking like, well, if they don't have a personality disorder, then it's changeable, right? But if they have a personality disorder, then it's not changeable. But the reality is, if they're not ready, willing, and able to change, then they're not ready, willing, and able to change in any type of relationship that involves growth. Like, is not going to be possible with the person who has a very rigid approach to their behavior and to life. But I think we've all gone through that. So it's not weird. I think you're totally normal. Let's see who else. I love it. Brenda says, "We have a special needs son that I stayed home with and took care of for 18 years. My ex financially had me frozen there. I got out. You can do it." Thank you for saying that. I love that. I love that. Yes. If you can be a stay at home mom for 18 years and financially frozen and taking care of a special needs child, and you were able to get out of that, then anybody can get out of that. So that is a real testament to your emotional strength, your physical strength, and your desire to move forward and empower yourself and regain power and control over your life and to move forward and rebuild. So yeah, that's huge. So yay you. Yay you. Ange says, "Dana, I started watching your videos because a pastor in my family is a narcissist. He is stalking me. You educated me even tonight." So I'm so glad that you were able to get some of the clarity that you were looking for from my videos. And I think you're going to find a lot of additional clarity in these live streams because my videos, especially my earlier videos, were all about my experience, and my experience is limited to just me. So even my experience at the domestic violence shelter it's pretty limited. We worked with maybe in my time there a couple hundred maybe women and children that went through there. But the cool thing with the live stream is it's connecting so many people. And I also have a support group. I have two support groups. One's on Facebook, one is on my website, and you can find the link to the Facebook one through my website, which is narcissistsupport.com, and then /forum, FORUM. Excuse me. And there's over 1,000 people. There's, I think, 2,000 people right now on my Facebook group and over 1,000 people on my website. So tons of feedback and support there. My grandfather was a minister of a church and was a narcissist, and created a lot of chaos and drama and conflict in my mother's life. So, you're not alone in that. And so this is one of the things I always tell people. That's the thing with emotionally abusive, or not even emotionally abusive, just abusive people in general, is it's really important that we spot the behavior and that we don't learn the wrong lessons. And so a lot of us, myself included, It's really easy to go through something that's a traumatic experience with an abusive person, and for our brain to link up what it thinks caused us pain. And so a lot of us will leave with the lesson of, oh well, it's men that are the problem, or it's women that are the problem, or it's Italian women, or it's redheads, or it's Catholics, or it's CEOs, or it's Scorpios, right? Like our brains link up kind of what causes us pain, and this is why it takes many of us several times of going around this mountain and getting and experiencing that pain every time around before we learn the right lesson. And the right lesson is that it's not the characteristic, it's not like anything, it's not anything other than problematic behavior. Like, problematic behavior is the problem. And problematic people, they can be male or female, young or old, rich or poor, any nationality, any religion, any sexual orientation. They can be a member of a person's church. They can be somebody you volunteer with. They can be a next door neighbor. They can be a friend. They can be a sibling. They can be a parent or a child or a significant other. It's the problematic behavior that's the problem, and it comes in all different kinds of packages. So it's really important that we spot it, because that was another thing that I did wrong, or yeah, wrong, in my earlier videos that I wish I had done differently, is because I only talked about my experience, both personally and professionally, with the domestic violence shelter, and with my own relationships, is I talked about narcissism from the perspective of a female victim and a male abuser. And the unintended consequence of that was that I inadvertently minimized and marginalized what men go through. And then I got this whole, avalanche of emails from men that were like, Dana, don't forget about us. We're going through this too, and we need help. We need help. We need answers. And they were so hungry for validation and for answers. So it's so important that we see abusive behavior for what it is. So I guess tell us a little bit more about your scenario. This pastor is stalking you. When did this start? How long has this been going on for? And I guess, how have you been handling it so far? Have you contacted the police? And I guess probably the biggest question is, how troublesome is this for you? Are you feeling that you are in danger, or is this more of a harassing thing that you find annoying? Kind of where on that spectrum are you with this? Robert is here. He says, so glad to be here. Yesterday was living hell with my narcissist mother. Mega rage. Don't even get me started. Today is so much better. Well, Robert, we're glad you're here, and I'm really glad that today is so much better. So hopefully we can give you the feedback and the support that you need. So, yeah. Heather is here. Desiree is here. Desiree says, my ex narcissist contacted me by sending a series of emails claiming someone told him I had his child. Totally untrue. Needless to say, I didn't entertain them at all. Yes. So, and Pula is here. Hi, Pula. So yeah, that's what we call a Hoover, and a Hoover is it's named after the Hoover vacuum, and it's a way that manipulative people try to reopen communication and suck the victim back into this crazy making dynamic. And so these Hoover attempts can start off as very innocent seeming communication, or it can be something that's more provoking, like the kind of email that you got. So it'll be something where a person's knee-jerk reaction is to be like, what, who told you that? Like, that's nuts, that's not true. Or saying something that it's inflammatory, right? So I'm glad that you didn't fall for it, and that you didn't get sucked back in, because it's all an illusion, and it's all just one big giant crazy making game. So it's just block, delete, and just drive on. Okay, bonjour, boy. says, is it normal to seek attention from others, especially since your narcissist treated you badly? Well, yeah, I think so. It depends on the different dynamics. So there's this whole kind of empty buckets theory that I've run with, and the whole theory is that kind of we all have three buckets, right? So we have the bucket, and I still need to get mine drawn into like an infographic. So we have these three buckets. Don't worry about trying to read any of this. I'll go through it. But these three buckets we're born into this life with three different buckets. And the first bucket we have the bucket of safety, we have the bucket of significance, and then we have the bucket of stability. And so our parents are the first ones that initially fill these buckets. And so if we go through life and these buckets aren't filled, then we're running at a deficit. And so, for example, the bucket of safety includes, food, shelter, clothing, water, basic physical needs. The bucket of significance includes love, affection, attention, importance, and those are basic emotional needs. And then the bucket of stability often includes like money, and it includes just kind of the added reassurance that the other two buckets are going to continue to be filled on a regular basis. So for example, in my life, I grew up with parents that, were really, really busy. They had their own business. And I interpreted their lack of kind of emotional and physical availability as that I wasn't worthy of love or attention. And so I grew up, and even up until fairly recently, had the empty buckets of I walked around feeling unimportant and unloved. And so for me, I when I encountered narcissists, especially with the love bombing, I drank that up. So I was really thirsty for attention and affection and feeling important. So, if I wasn't getting that from a narcissist, I would soak that up from anybody that would be able to fill those buckets. And I think a lot of people do this. And so it's helpful for us to reflect and think back to kind of what empty buckets do you think that you have? And so if you're having very similar empty buckets or even totally different empty buckets, but if you have the empty bucket of attention, right, which it sounds like you might, if he's not or she is not filling that, then it's totally normal and understandable that you would try to go out and get that bucket filled. Where this becomes problematic is if you're getting it filled in problematic ways. And so a lot of people will start filling that bucket of attention in very attention seeking ways, right? So being promiscuous or causing conflict or causing drama or, suicide threats or these kinds of things. So it's, our buckets get ideally filled and they get depleted every single day. So it's really important that we stay aware of them and make sure that we're getting them filled, and ideally in healthy, empowering ways. So it's just something to be aware of. But a lot of partners of narcissists, from kind of what I've read and what I've seen, because they're not able to adequately or accurately identify what's going on, and that they don't realize that they're with an emotionally abusive person, or physically, or sexually or financially. They're not aware that they're with an abusive person, so they tend to internalize this, and they're like, is it me or is it them? And they oftentimes start thinking that they're the problem, that they're the narcissist. And so they don't know what's going on, what's really wrong with their relationship. And so, in order to cope with it, because they're not comfortable with leaving for whatever reason, then they oftentimes, over a period of time, turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they turn to cheating, they turn to different things to numb themselves out. So, shopping, spending money, food, you know, it's kind of these self-soothing type things. So it is normal to try to fill your empty bucket, but just make sure that you're filling it in a way that's empowering to you, and that you're still treating yourself with respect and dignity and value. Overcoming Understanding says, every time I asked my ex why he did something, he was like a toddler, sulking, looking at the floor, saying, I don't know. Yeah, that that's what they do. So, and it's like dealing with a child in an adult body. There's no accountability, there's no responsibility, there's no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Yeah. It's crazy making. So Cecilia says, my ex usually hoovers in March and it's right around the corner. So because that's the case and you know that, so that's good, right? So now you're anticipating his behavior. You're like, okay, it's March. This is when this normally happens. This is a pattern. So now you can anticipate his behavior, which you're doing. But now the second part of that is now anticipating your reaction. And a lot of dealing with a narcissist, it's like playing chess. And so once you realize, okay, I'm kind of like locked in this game that I never wanted to play with this person, then you can start actually thinking a few moves ahead. So if you know that he hoovers every single March, you can kind of plan emotionally for this. So what I mean by that is, you can either change up your social media accounts. You can, get your phone number changed. You can change your email. You can do all these things, which I know are incredibly inconvenient, but that's an option. You could also just prepare yourself emotionally, which it sounds like you are. So if and when he does surface, you're not caught off guard. And then part of that preparing emotionally would be to make sure that you do have that list of kind of, for when you miss him. So you don't get caught up in that nostalgia and you're not tempted to go back. And then also to kind of think ahead with reframing if he does resurface. So you don't give him the power to steal any more of your happiness. And so, deciding ahead of time, okay, if he does resurface, I am not going to let this ruin my day or my week or my month or even an hour, even a minute. I'm not even going to let this ruin a minute of my day. So I'm going to tell myself if he hoovers, that this is a reminder of why I don't want somebody like this in my life. And you spin it and you make it into something positive. You make it work for you. And that's about all any of us can do. So Valenta is here. Billy Joe is here. And then says, I finally remembered to watch this live. Hi, Dana. Ange says, there have got to be a lot of pastors out there who are crazy. Well, Ange, that's one of those professions that there's a lot of ego involved, right? Because the attention here these pastors are, right, these heads of the church, kind of the right hand of God. I think just that profession too really attracts a lot of people that are emotional manipulators, because and egomaniacs for sure, because they just love um you know they love having a congregation. I mean, that's, come on. So you have to be careful. And I think at the end of the day, with anything in life, it's really important that we always maintain our, locus of control, that we maintain our own power and control, and we do that by thinking critically. So, I don't want people to listen to what I'm saying and they think, well, now I don't feel safe in church, or I don't feel safe going to a therapist, or going to to see a doctor or a nurse, or, these other professions, because there might be narcissists there. I think all of this just reconfirm to you that you need to think critically about things and to trust your own judgment. That's what's so, 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 so key. That is the biggest lesson in all of this, is learning to really trust your own judgment. And if you're feeling red flags, because red flags, they're felt, they're not seen. And that's why a lot of people, we don't see them, because we don't ever see them. We feel them. So if you're feeling red flags, to slow down and back up a little bit, and then see kind of what's going on as you're moving forward. But to not, don't live your life in fear. Just getting more confidence in your judgment as you're moving forward is the best way to prevent, manipulative people in your life. Let's see. Brenda says, it was very scary after I kicked him out. I felt like he wouldn't care if our son and I died. The police thought I was crazy because he wasn't violent for 20 years and wasn't fighting me for custody of our son. Well, I totally get where you're coming from. And I think a lot of people do. So kind of what you're describing is this whole what's called the mask of the narcissist slipping. And so they tend to put on this really, this really great mask, this really great front to a lot of people, but when that mask slips, and sometimes it can slip just out of the blue, it's terrifying because then we get a glimpse of this person that doesn't feel human, and we see either with a look in their eyes, or we just get that sense of exactly what you said. Wow, you really don't care if I live or die. Like, I don't know who you are, but you are like the devil. I mean, there's so much blackness and negativity and darkness within that person that it's terrifying. And so I think most all of us have that experience with narcissists and sociopaths, where you just realize that there's nothing there. Like, there's nothing behind those eyes, that we're not dealing with a person that has remorse or empathy. And that alone is it's just terrifying. I'm really glad that you guys were able to get out of there. And so that's the other thing too, like with abuse, right? So people that are taught about domestic violence or abuse tend to be taught the more stereotypical, the stereotypes about abuse, where it's this whole, well, the victim's only in danger if this person's physically abusive. Actually, no, that's not the case at all. Most physical abuse is a very late stage of abuse, and that generally leads to death. So, on average, a person that's in an abusive relationship, they leave 7 times before they either leave for good or they're killed. So that's a big thing. A lot of these relationships, because narcissists, they don't care. They lack empathy, they lack remorse. They're selfish and they're entitled. They don't care. They don't attach to people like normal people attach to people. And because of this, human life has no meaning. It has no value. So, again, kind of thinking about like the Scott Petersons of the world or the Jodi Ariases of the world, and they just feel so justified in killing. And it's really important that we see that lack of empathy for what it is, and we translate in our brain like what that really means. But yes, a lot of police, a lot of therapists, a lot of, even when I was working at the domestic violence shelter, it was this whole idea of, a person wasn't really in danger until they were like really being beaten up. And that's not the case at all. So a lot of abusive relationships don't even get to that point. I mean, that's a small percentage of people that experience extreme physical violence, but let alone extreme physical violence. They generally don't get to that point. Or the abusive person, if a person is abused to the point where it's visible bruises, like on their face, on their arms, they're put in the hospital, that relationship that is so far progressed. Like, that person is in imminent danger, and I strongly encourage them to run. Like, you need to get out of there, because they are just a few temper tantrums away from seriously hurting or killing them. Especially, and this is kind of just going off on a little side tangent here, but I've had this question come up several different times now in several of the support groups about an abusive person that has been choking them. So I just want to just touch on this a little bit here. So just humor me. A person doesn't choke another person. We choke on food, right? When a person puts their hands around another person's neck, that's strangulation. Okay, so it's really important that we see the difference. We see that for how big of an issue that it really is. So they are strangulating another person. If a person puts their hands around another person's neck, they are doing so, and they're prepared to take a person's life. It's really easy to accidentally take a person's life, especially if they've got their hands around a person's neck. So, and it's amazing the level of cognitive dissonance that people will how they'll still minimize that, even if they're like, well, this person was strangling me to the point where I blacked out, and now he's in jail. But now he's come back, and it's like he was steps away from killing you. Like this can't get any more serious. The next time this happens, you will be leaving that place in a body bag. And so I'm not saying this to be morbid. I'm not saying this for any other reason other than trying to cut through cognitive dissonance. And it's like I said, it's come up several times in the support groups now, and I just really really want people to understand that this is a huge thing when abuse, especially when abuse gets to that point. Or if a person is feeling like something's off and that they are in danger, odds are it's because something's off and you're in danger. So it's really important, if you're to pay attention to that gut instinct and that spidey sense. It might not, and it probably won't make sense to anybody else that you could possibly be in danger. But if you're feeling like you are, especially, so like Brenda was saying, her husband hadn't been violent for 20 years. He did not have a history of violence, but she was feeling like he had the potential to be violent and to possibly kill them. You've got to go with that gut instinct and realize that other people also are experiencing their own level of cognitive dissonance, and they're justifying and minimizing and rationalizing things, especially because we all have this idea of what an abusive person looks like, what an abusive person acts like. And it's, if this person doesn't have a history of violence, if they, if they seem like a pretty decent person, then it's not going to compute to other people. And so, again, just having to get that reassurance and that faith in your own judgment to do what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe and sane. So that was kind of a long a long tangent there. So let's see. We've got Danae here. Welcome. She says, I've been watching you from video number 1. Hope all is well. So, hi. Well, thank you. You've been around for a while then, 'cause I think we're up to about 155 or so videos. Let's see. Practical Dreamer says, yes, if they apologize, be very wary. They want control over you again. Yes, they will always want control over us again. Over everybody. That's their goal. So I talked about this in the last video, and I really, really like this. So the book club book, I think it was for December, was The Verbally Abusive Relationship. And there's a link to it on the forum, narcissistsupport.com/FORUM. And in that book, she talks about that there are 2 different realities. I would say that there's 3 realities, but I think her interpretation of that is is fantastic anyhow. But so she views that there are 2 different realities. There's a reality 1 and there's a reality 2. And a reality 1 type person has the mindset of having power and control over another person. And a reality 2 type person, their mindset is co-creation or a sense of mutuality. So she said a lot of narcissists and emotionally manipulative people have this reality 1 mindset where their whole goal is to get power and control over other people. So they're always playing a game, is really what that means. Reality 2 people tend to think that they're in a relationship. So we're trying to co-create. We're trying to understand and be understood, and to be open and honest and sincere and solutions oriented in our communication. We're trying to have this relationship progress and move forward. This other person is not involved in a relationship. They're having, in fact, a manipulationship. And so all of their and this is why you get the gaslighting. This is why you get the bursts of narcissistic rage. This is why you get a lot of this behavior that doesn't make sense. It's their way of trying to regain power and control over the victim. So a lot of this, more so with narcissists and sociopaths, but narcissists tend to not be so aware of this because they just feel entitled and justified with things. more of the antisocial personality type people, where you're talking, sociopaths, psychopaths, that kind of thought process is a lot more to the forefront of their mind. So it's intentional. So the scam artists of the world, the internet dating scammers, the Nigerian princes that email us that are trying to get money and all these things, those are more of like the sociopaths. So they have this pervasive pattern of exploiting other people for gain, and they are very aware of what they're doing, and they enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. Whereas a narcissist might play a game like that with the gaslighting and everything, and they really don't. It might not be at the forefront of their mind because they're just so self-absorbed that they're like literally lost in themselves. So interesting stuff. So let me scroll down and see what other questions we've got going on. Anna Mika is here. She says, hello, first time here, long time listener. Hi, Anna Mika, welcome. Let's see. Oh, my thing just hopped up. Okay, Suzanne is here. Welcome, Suzanne. Oh, and John is here as well. Suzanne says, I found this really great TED Talk about helping you get your self-esteem back. Go on and look under body language. Amy Cuddy is the speaker, Cuddy. I'm going to write that down. Amy Cuddy. I love TED Talks. It's just such a neat invention. So let me scroll up. John is saying, can you talk more about that? But I don't know what he is referencing. Oh, John says, Dana, last week you talked about how much a narcissist gives versus how much we give to them. Can you talk more about that? I am not 100% sure what you were talking about, like in detail. Can you give me some more details? Because I that is not jogging my memory very much. And then I'd be more than happy to address that question. Hot Potato says, you guys refrain from dating until you feel emotionally healed and stable. Yes, I agree completely. And so I would even go a step further and say, at a minimum, you want yourself to be emotionally healed and stable. But really, I encourage you guys to get to the place where you are bringing your highest and best self to the table, because it's the whole water seeks its own level. We date people based on the same level of dysfunction or function. That's what that means. So when I say water seeks its own level, that's where that goes. So you want to make sure, that you are bringing that you are a person that you would really want to date. And so kind of across the board. So not just emotionally and physically and financially and spiritually and all of these things. So if you have some, and not to say that you have to wait till you're perfect to start dating, but get to a place where you really love and appreciate yourself, where you've worked out as many of your insecurities as possible, where you're feeling, that you have a healthy self-esteem, that you are able to maintain your power and control, and definitely that you've gotten to the place where you realize what empty buckets you may or may not have, and that you're being able to identify them and fill them in a healthy, productive way. Because the thing with the empty buckets is, if they are low, then we're not thinking clearly. But here's the catch, is we think we're thinking clearly. So this is why people will say things like, if you're fresh out of a divorce, don't do anything for a year. Have you heard this? They'll say, don't do anything for a year after you get divorced. Don't quit your job. Don't move. Don't buy a zoo like they did in that one movie. Don't do those things, because it's this crazy thing that happens in our brain, and this is a large part of like just kind of this whole cognitive dissonance thing. So when we set the reset button on our life and we get a divorce or some sort of major traumatic event happens, somebody dies, because a divorce is like a death, if anything major like that happens, we're all of a sudden in this scramble trying to put the pieces of our life back together. And when we're in a scramble, we're not thinking clearly. And so we're making these really snap, kind of knee jerk decisions that may or may not turn out good. Sometimes they do, but I think more often than not, they don't. And so it's really easy for us to have these vulnerabilities, and that's exactly what those empty buckets are. So like I'd mentioned earlier, my empty buckets that I have to watch out for are the feeling of importance and attention and affection. So if I'm not getting those filled, those are vulnerabilities for me. So I have to make sure that I'm getting those filled in positive, constructive, empowering ways. um, you know so and it's a really good idea too with this whole empty bucket thing before a person starts dating, because the thing with dating is we have to get to the place where we're focused on being choosy instead of being chosen. And that's the big difference. So a lot of people, especially the more codependent kind of people, we go into dating thinking, oh, this person is so great, because we tend to really, and this is common for I think anybody that starts dating, we tend to see this new person through rose colored glasses. And that's just part of our chemicals in our brain trying to get us to bond with another human being. But it's really, really important that we're able to take off those rose colored glasses and look at this person through a magnifying glass instead, and to figure out, do they fit into our life? Do they fit into what we're looking for? And to not be so concerned about, oh, they're so fantastic, I'll just turn myself inside and out so I can fit into their life. And because that's where a lot of us go wrong. So getting to the place emotionally and having your buckets filled enough to where if you're on a few dates with a person, that you're moving slow enough, you're not getting caught up with that love bombing, you're not getting caught up with this rushing of intimacy. Ideally, you're not having sex for at least 90 days. Yes, you heard me right. So, like, not having sex for 90 days. You're getting to know a person without bringing in, because sex, especially for people that are codependent, it seals the deal. It really, when people have sex, it releases all of this oxytocin, and there's these dopamine, there's these feel good chemicals, there are these bonding chemicals. Oxytocin is the same chemical that's found in a mother's breast milk. So women release it and men release it, and they release it when they orgasm. So it happens during sex, and it can artificially and prematurely bond people that really shouldn't be bonding. So it's important that we know this going into dating, so we can kind of keep our senses about us and make good decisions with the partner. So you really want to treat dating like a job interview where you're interviewing them, right? And so you have this idea, and this also is something that I wish somebody would have told me, because I've got to figure everything out the hard way. But of when you go into dating, to have a clear idea in your mind about what is deal breaker behavior. What is deal breaker behavior for you before all those emotions come into play? Because I think we've all been there, right? So if you have this idea of, well, I am not going to date a person who is verbally abusive, or who is, can't hold a job, or, kind of has 10 kids. And the next thing you're living with a guy who's got 12 kids, and he yells and screams, and he's unemployed, and he's been unemployed for 10 years. So, it's important going in, because cognitive dissonance sets in, and that's kind of this glass ceiling that we hit. Especially we hit this when our buckets are empty. And so it's a defense mechanism is really what it is, and it justifies why we're doing what we're doing. And it's because that situation that we're in is meeting some of those needs to some extent, even if it's not meeting it in a healthy way or even like a desirable way. So, a great way to kind of tell too, if you're finding a good partner when you're dating, is to ask yourself, if my younger sibling or if my best friend were in this relationship, um, you know, would I be excited for them or would I have concerns? What advice would I give to them? So, kind of distancing yourself emotionally and taking a step back and looking at that relationship from an outside perspective as to the advice that you would give somebody else helps to really cut through that cognitive dissonance, and it gives you that emotional. It gets rid of that emotional cognitive dissonance, that emotional barrier there, where you can look at your situation more objectively. So, if you find yourself in a situation that you would warn your younger sibling about, or warn your best friend about, odds are then you need to not be in that situation. So that's just, hope that helps. So, okay, let me scroll down. Um, Here. Peace Pom Pom says, yes, Pepper, I thought I was hallucinating the first time I saw his temper tantrum. And Suzanne asks, Overcoming Understanding, is your stuff on YouTube? Yes. So Overcoming Understanding just recently started her channel, and she talks about her own journey through all of from healing and understanding and kind of trying to make sense of all of it. So, um, I think it's really great if people can encourage other survivors of these things and subscribe to their channel. It helps us when we get subscribers to our channel, and YouTube, it helps them to well, not help, well, it helps to promote our videos whenever we get more subscribers. So it'd be great if you guys would subscribe to her channel and support her in all of this. And it's really neat to see all of the different people that are starting channels. Randy Andretti, I don't know if she's going to be on tonight, but she's another one that's got a channel, and she's a wealth of information. Let's see. There's so many. Narcissist free. Show boundaries is another one that I just think is so cool. And she's the show boundaries gal, has been through stuff. I don't know how she got through it. Like, her strength is absolutely phenomenal. I just think the world of her. And I really would like to get to the place where I get more organized, more organized, and more time in order to do more like interviews and kind of joint videos here with other YouTubers that are in this same topic area, because there's some really amazing people out there that are doing videos that I would love to know more about and would love to talk to. So, Practical Dreamer says, it's so true about trusting your intuition. Even well-meaning friends don't see what you do. Yes, they don't. And it's one of those things. It's like there. So the book club book for January was The Gift of Fear, and that was a fantastic book. And it talks a lot about trusting your intuition. And it talks a lot about kind of why people don't trust their intuition. And it's interesting. The guy who wrote the book, Gavin Day Becker is his name, does, and I don't quite understand what he does for a living, but he does some sort of like criminal profiling. And so he talks about predators and really violent crimes and helping people to slow down and see the red flags, and how our brain just doesn't process red flags, and how a lot of professionals don't see red flags, but they're always red flags. Like, problematic people come with red flags. So fantastic book. Oh, interesting. Practical Dreamer says, I had friends tell me I was just sabotaging because they couldn't see under the mask. Really interesting. So I had something kind of similar. I went from dating Jack and then finding out that he had this whole double life. And I mean, everything got really crazy really fast. And I left immediately. And when I found that out, and then it was a couple years later, I began dating Steve. And I had that my spidey sense going off. I had that funny feeling that something was really off. And I remember talking to other friends because I had other friends that had known him as long as I had known him. And I had one other friend who was like, you know what? Yeah, that's kind of weird. Like, I don't know. But he was so charming and likable and funny. And nobody saw that side of him except for me and then that one friend that ended up saying, she even at one point had said, she's like, Dana, he's a really good guy. And I really thought, you know what, I just must have issues. Which made sense, right? Like I must have issues with men or with commitment, with trust. But no, the reality was that those red flags were really there, but that I had glossed over them. I missed him because I fell into not trusting my own judgment and my own perception of events and getting tangled up in a lot of well-intended bad advice. So that's why it's really important. And I think after we've had a manipulative person in our life, it's totally understandable as to why we would question our perception of reality because our sense of reality has been manipulated for so long, right? But this is another thing. Like, I encourage people to not date until you get to the place where you trust your judgment. Um, don't rely. Here's some more mistakes that I made. So I really thought when I first began reading. Hold on a second here. I'm gonna take a drink. I should be drinking hot tea, but I just love sparkling water. So, anyways, um, so one of the mistakes that I made was when I first began researching, narcissism and sociopaths and, antisocial personality disorder. When I first began really looking into that, I was reading, oh, well, it's only about, 2 to 3% of the population that have these personality disorders. And so just like one of the earlier questions we had of, well, is this person really a narcissist or a sociopath? I mean, it's only 2 or 3% of the population. So, like, statistically speaking, what are the odds that that I could have actually been in a relationship with a sociopath, right? Like, what are the odds of that? Or what are the odds of me being in a relationship with a narcissist? And so I got really hung up on that. And I was trying to make sense of it, trying to make sense of it, trying to make sense of it. Of course, telling other friends, talking to my therapist about it. And of course, everybody thinking that I'm making a mountain out of a molehill and that it was just a bad breakup and I just need to get over it. And he was just a cheater or a player and that was it. And I knew deep down, I'm like, no, this like far surpassed this. Like what I encountered, it was the lack of empathy and the lack of remorse that lack of humanity is what it was that signaled to me that I wasn't dealing with a normal, just run of the mill jerk, right? So, but because I was telling myself, well, it's only 2 or 3% of the population, it'll probably never happen again, even if this person was ever a sociopath to begin with, right? Then the odds of it happening again are like really, really slim. So I don't really need to be on the lookout for it. It was just sort of a fluke thing. And so I was scared to date again because I was scared to get hurt again, but I really didn't think that I would encounter another person like that again, ever. And so, fast forward a couple years, dating Steve, and it was pretty much the same thing all over again. The double life, the lies, the nonsense, the Lifetime TV movie. And I thought, well, what in the hell? Like, like what are the odds? Like statistically speaking, like what are the odds? What is going on here? And so that's when I really called this like big timeout in my life, and I'm like, I've got to figure this out because this is just bizarre. Like I don't think I've ever, at least not knowingly really, dated people that had, had that level of craziness to that extent in their life. I mean, I dated one really crazy guy in high school, but that was, 20 something years ago. So it just, it didn't make sense to me as to why that kept happening. And, it's other people don't see it. And, really kind of my big lessons learned in that was, there are a lot of these people out there, like a lot of them. And, statistics say 3%. I think it's a lot closer to probably like 7 to 10% of the population. And I mean that. So I I get a ton of emails and I hear from a ton of different people. And it's one of those things like you can ask around. Like if you talk to a friend or family member, odds are they've experienced the narcissist. They might not be using that word to describe that person. They might be using, selfish jerk or, asshole or nut job or crazy maker or sociopath or psycho or psychopath. They might be using different words for it, but they're describing the same type of person. So emotionally manipulative people are out there in much larger numbers than are reported. So it's really important that you're able to spot the behavior for what it is. And so another aha moment that I had, which was really kind of a fairly recent thing, was realizing that I had a pattern of a lot of problematic people in my life, not just in relationships, but in friendships too. I found myself over the years in a lot of friendships that were very one sided. I had a best friend in high school who, even back then, I described it. I'm like, I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship. Like she was incredibly controlling, demanding, difficult, but the good times are really good, the bad times are really bad. All of the dynamics of an abusive relationship were there, but it didn't dawn on me that I could be in an abusive relationship with a friend. And it didn't dawn on me until like really about probably 4 months ago. Like that was actually this pattern is this issue in my life was pervasive, like that there's been a lot of problematic people in my life over the years. So that's kind of, and this is what I tell people with having a really painful relationship with a narcissist, the benefit of that, because really there's a lot to be gained from that. The benefit of that is it's sort of the fire that we need to see in order for us to realize that there's been a lot of smoke going on for a long time. We just never noticed it. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think if you guys look around in your life and you think about what other emotionally damaging people have you had in your life over the years, odds are there's probably been a parent, there's probably, or a sibling, or some friends, or some other relationships. They just haven't been to like that level of extreme where there's been, double life and you feel like they're gonna kill you, and it might not have been that extreme, but it's still along the same lines of that level of problematic. So, okay, that's enough of me yammering on here. Let me scroll down and read some more questions here. Um, M. Olson says, Dana, can you give an example of once you learned all this that you recognized red flags and let go of a person in your life once you noticed their behavior? I sure can. That's a really great question. So, boy. Well, I posted one um, text conversation that I'd had with this one guy I was on through a dating site, and we never even got to the point of meeting. And it was just a really really bizarre thing. So right away, it started off with the love bombing. He was sending me all of these messages right out of the gate and was doing the whole rushing of intimacy. And right away it was very much like, within moments of reading your profile, we have so much in common, and I was ready to shut down my profile because you're all I want. Kind of this over the top real flowery language. And so we did have a lot in common. So part of me is like, well, I can kind of see where, he might, that seems like a little extreme because we haven't even met yet, but I could see what he was talking. He was a vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian. So like these kinds of things. And then he kept sending me pictures of, so like one of them, and I have it on my website. He if you look up, I think if you go to my website narcissistsupport.com and you look up hoovering, it'll bring up all of the different hoovering things, and then there's a couple on there of hoovering attempts. Oh, I think no, I think there's one that of a hoovering attempt from another guy, but then there was I think it was Narc Speak was the blog post I did about that. But he had sent this picture, and it was supposed to be of his breakfast, and but it was very obvious the way that he'd set the picture up that it was I was supposed to be seeing his like Apple computer in the background. Like it was very staged, and it was like his way of kind of like asset dropping, right? Like this is like status dropping, I guess. Like this is what I have. And that struck me as odd. And then it progressed to he was doing the whole kind of triangulation thing, telling me about all these women that he dated that were much younger and that they were doctors and attorneys, they were super successful, and how they were just really really jealous. And so that was a huge red flag. So I'm like, well, unless like people aren't just like normally really really jealous for no reason. And he was telling me about this one girl he dated who was a psychiatrist, and that she was incredibly jealous and she just couldn't handle it anymore and basically had a nervous breakdown. And so that was a huge red flag. I should have called things off like right around then, but at the time I kind of thought, well, maybe there's like more explanation here, so I kind of stuck in there. And then he had made some sort of comment about his he said something like, "Oh, you didn't even comment on the pictures that I posted." And I said, "Well, what pictures?" Because he kept sending me all these pictures. That was another red flag. He kept sending me all these pictures of himself. Like I didn't even ask for it, but there were all these like pictures of the shirt off, and it was always kind of like, "Hey, check me out," kind of a thing. A total turnoff. But mind you, again, we hadn't even met yet, and his how did it go? So I'd said, "Well, I oh, he made some sort of comment. He's like, "No, I actually got off that dating site earlier." And I said, "Well, no, you didn't, because I just went like, you just said that I didn't comment on your pictures, but now you're saying that you're no longer on there, but I was just on there to go look at the pictures that you were upset that I didn't see." And so then I caught him in a lie, and then it became like crazy weird squirrely narc speak where he just started saying just a bunch of I mean, it was it was just like a bunch of words trying to like dig his way out from underneath this. And so I have a copy of our whole text conversation on it, which is pretty funny because I had made the comment. I'm like, I'm not a fool. I see exactly what you're doing, and like I'm sorry, I'm not gonna play this game, so like I'm done, peace. And like left. So um yeah, oh, there's been lots of red flags that I've seen, and in lots of people. I mean, there was a guy I that does security at my job, who I was very friendly with, and because I'm tend to be a very friendly person, and just not like not like overly friendly, but saying good morning and how you doing and all that, and he really took that in the wrong way and began really flirting with me, which made me a little bit uncomfortable. And then I had asked a coworker about him, and then she said, "Well, I think he's got a girlfriend." And so then I asked him about that. I said, "Well, do you have a girlfriend?" And he's like, "Yeah, but I'm thinking about moving out." And I'm like, "Moving out? Like you live with your girlfriend? Are you kidding me?" And so, I mean, that's a pretty, it's like a slow pitch, right? Like it's a pretty obvious red flag. So I told him, I said, no, like honestly, I would never date you or anybody like you. So like, thanks, but no thanks. That's not looking, you're just lining things up before you got to shut one door before you open another one, and I'm not looking to be on the side. So those are just some examples of some different red flags. you know um really kind of stories that don't line up are, I think, what I've come across the most often, um, especially with dating. I think in dating sites, and I forget the percentage of people on dating sites that are just there for sex. It's pretty high. So it's really, really important that we don't take people for, I know it sounds paranoid and terrible, but don't take people for face value on dating sites. Just take things slow, value your time, value your emotions, and just give it time. So if a person, so here's a good red flag that a friend of mine who's going on different dating sites too experienced. So she was dating, kind of seeing this one guy for a few months, and he had told her early on that well, he was like, he could only text her or call her during, like, at certain times. And he was also very weird about something along the lines of about stuff that she could text him back. And he'd said, well, sometimes his teenage daughter got his phone, and so he didn't want her seeing anything. And my friend is not the kind of person that would be like sending sexy pictures or anything. So that whole thing didn't make sense. And it's, as an outside person, that struck me as he's either married or he's got a girlfriend, and he doesn't want her texting him during certain times because he's with this other person. And he doesn't want any like incriminating text messages either. So he wanted to keep things at a very, uh, you know, at a level where he could easily manipulate this other person, and get out of anything, and just say like, oh, well, she's just a friend because, look at these texts. Like, none of them are inappropriate. But I think really the whole thing was really squirrely. Honestly, now at this point in my life, I talked about this a little bit before, and I'm going to keep talking about, because I think it's a really great way to get in alignment with trusting ourselves. Is so I came up with this concept about a month or so ago, and the whole concept is to go after those people, places, experiences, ideas, kind of what have you, that on a scale of fulfillment from like a 0 to 10, so 0 being not fulfilling or enjoyable at all, 10 being like outrageously enjoyable and fulfilling, to go after those people, places, experiences, ideas that are at least a 9 or a 10. If it's anything less than that, drive on. And so this is not, a hard science here. This is just kind of an overall, your perception of people, places, experiences, ideas. So if you're feeling like, something or someone is like a 6 or an 8, get in tune with what these different numbers along your scale of fulfillment feel like. So what a 2 feels like versus a 5 versus a 7 versus a 10. And you can start doing that with everything around you. So like, you can do it with the clothes you're wearing. You can do it with, the jewelry you're wearing. You can do it with, stuff that you're drinking, or you can do, the pillows on your couch, or, kind of, you name it. And just going through, I think it's a really great process, like going through your environment and paying attention to, how do you feel about this? Because a lot of codependent people, we have, we're so used to putting other people's, being in tune with other people's feelings, that we're not in tune with our own. And so it's a very kind of new experience to be like, well, how do I feel? Because it is valid. It's very valid. It's important that you know how you feel, because you're worthy of having feelings. And so, so many of us have been invalidated for so long. We've been told that we're too sensitive, or, that we're difficult, or that we're the problem. And so we've kind of just tuned out to being uncomfortable, to where uncomfortable is just the new normal. So, it's really important that you're getting in touch with those nine or tens, because once you are in touch with those nine or tens, when you are dating people, when you are going on dating sites, it really helps to cut through that cognitive dissonance, and it helps to get rid of that whole, well, is it him or her, or is it me, or do I have issues with trust or commitment, or is it because they're not a narcissist, or am I so damaged, or like, why am I not attracted to them? Like, you just bypass all of that whole conversation with yourself, and you turn inward, and you start examining, how do I feel about this person? Like, and it doesn't have to make them bad or wrong. It just means that they're not your 9 or your 10. And honestly, the worst thing that we can do is to date somebody who is a 7 or an 8, really, even, or a 4 for us, and date them and fool ourselves into thinking that we can make this work, because it's disrespectful for them. It sucks up their time and their energy, right? And it wastes their time too. So it's really important. And of course, it sucks up and wastes our time and energy too. So we want to make sure that it's a win-win. And the best way for it to be a win-win is if they are a 9 or a 10 for us. And ideally, and this is how the theory goes, that we would be a 9 or a 10 for them. And so this goes back to, our whole highest and best self to the table. And that's why. So, okay, so let me scroll down. Hot Potato says, question. I had spent a lot of time in a relationship with a toxic man in the past. After he discarded me, I was broken, and I feel like I adopted a lot of his unhealthy behavior. So what you're describing is very common, just so you know that. A lot of people in abusive relationships of any kind tend to have that happen. And so the good news is, now that you have brought awareness to it and you're like, wow, you know what? There's a lot of things in my personality now that I'm not okay with. And this is not who I am. And this person really rubbed off on me in a lot of negative ways. Now that you've brought awareness to it, now you can work to change it. And so, none of us are perfect. None of us are ever at that finish point where we just kind of, everything just makes sense. We've got it all figured out, right? So life is a journey. Emotional health is a journey. And, once we know better, we can start working on doing better. And that's all any of us can do. So, um, you know, if you're spotting problematic behavior, then it's a good opportunity to increase your own emotional awareness and to get those kind of wrinkles in your personality ironed out. So totally, totally doable. Um, oh, okay, Little Britches here. Little Britches says, my narcissist best friend is urging me to widen out and make new friends. What is she up to? Well, Little Britches, I have no idea what she's up to, but my question would be, why are you best friends with a narcissist? So, we don't have control over what she's doing, right? But we do have, or not we, but you have control over your part in it. So then the question is, okay, so I have this really problematic, emotionally manipulative person as a best, not just a friend, a best friend. I have this emotionally manipulative person as a best friend. So that's worth turning inward and examining, how on earth did this person become my best friend? So what about her was attractive? Like, what about her made you want to be your best friend? Because this goes back to the whole empty buckets thing. So if it's, she really, I think with friends, it tends to be more that bucket of significance. So maybe paying attention, or making you feel important, or making you feel loved or accepted, these kinds of things. Because a lot of them do that, as friends or as lovers. If she was meeting one of those needs for you, then that is one of your vulnerabilities. And so it's really important that you learn to fill that bucket yourself, to where you're not giving these kind of key roles in your life of like the role of best friend or the role of a boyfriend or a husband down the road, to problematic people. So narcissists don't have friends. So it's just important to realize that your best friend is your best friends with an illusion. And narcissists always bring pain wherever they go. So there's always pain. There's the pain of either being in the relationship and postponing the breakup, or there's the pain of the breakup. So it's sort of like I have to kind of ask yourself, well, okay, I have this really highly problematic person in my life. Problematic people always bring pain 100% of the time. So do I want to experience the pain now, or do I want to experience it later? Because if I experience it now, I can just kind of rip off that band-aid and then drive on. If I experience it later, it's going to be significantly more pain. So knowing that those are your two options, like you're going to experience pain either way, is it now or is it later? And then kind of moving forward ahead, knowing that. So, Candy, there's been some talk here about the book Psychopath Free. That is a fantastic book. Fantastic book. That needs to be a book club book. Maybe we'll do that book next month. I read that a while ago, and man, yeah, talk about aha moments. Highly recommend that book. Let's see, Robert says, my mother went off the scale yesterday with rage tantrum and denied it later, and the crazy threat she made, and then did it again over nothing. So yes, that's pretty par for the course. I think a lot of narcissists, that's kind of what they do. They deny, they minimize, they justify, they rationalize their bad behavior. Which is that alone, that denial, that minimization, that justification, that rationalization of their bad behavior, that is a form of emotional abuse and psychological abuse and verbal abuse. So because it serves to erode another person's sense of reality, and that's what makes that abusive. So not to mention the rage itself. So that level of anger that's kind of unleashed around other people is incredibly abusive as well. And all any of us can do with abusive people, once we realize that we have an abusive person, that we're sharing a house with an abusive person, or that they're in our life in any capacity, the biggest tool that we have in our toolkit is the tool of anticipation. So we can anticipate their behavior to the best of our ability. So if okay, this is what my mom does. She has these temper tantrums, and this is what she does, and then she's going to deny it. So once you bring awareness to that, then you can start anticipating. And so then once you're anticipating it, there is no more being surprised. It's a lot easier to kind of go emotionally neutral, because it's sort of like, yeah, this is my mom. This is what she does. Like, I'm no longer surprised by this behavior. I find it incredibly annoying, but I'm not surprised by it, because you're anticipating it. So when you anticipate it, it's sort of like you give up the hope that it would be any different. You quit living in that it should be different, or that it could be different. You're dealing with what is. And so then that way, if she acts in any different way, then you're caught off guard, then you're surprised, then you have an emotional response. But you don't have one if you're anticipating it, because you're like, yeah, that's my mom. She goes batshit crazy. Then she lies about it, and then she's fine. Like, and it's you're not caught off guard by that. Um, you know, and it's hard. It's hard to kind of really hard to just emotionally detach from that. But I think you will find a tremendous amount of peace in just that acceptance of, this is what is. Like, she is not going to change anytime soon, and this is just who she is, and I'm just going to accept it. Doesn't mean that I have to like it. Doesn't mean that I have to stick around for it. Part of the whole anticipating it can be if you know that there's a certain trigger that she gets triggered on paydays or on full moons or on, you know, who know, like whatever triggers her, if you can keep your own power and control and ideally get yourself out of that situation or do what you need to do in order to stay safe and sane or as safe and sane as possible given your situation. Hot Potato says, do you find that empaths absorb the bad traits and behaviors after prolonged abuse? That's a great question. Do I find that? I don't know if I've ever really thought about that before. It wouldn't surprise me. I think a lot of empaths do tend to be kind of emotional sponges. Um, I think I think a person they can be a codependent, or I think codependence and empaths are two different things. They tend to often go hand in hand, but not necessarily. So, um, if a person, so like I would consider myself to be a very strong empath. I would also consider myself at one point in my life to have a lot of like codependency type traits and issues. They weren't they were, I would say, a lot more extreme when I was younger, but as my awareness increased, then that kind of got out of my life. And so, um, you know, my boundaries and my standards are a lot healthier than where they were before. Um, anyways, you can be codependent, you can be an empath, you can be both, or you can be one or the other. So, and I've kind of met and talked to a lot of people that are one or the other or both. I think with empaths, if they can understand kind of the strengths of empath. So I read this great article the other day, and I really really liked this. And I think this is a really great way for empaths to, in a lot of ways, think of themselves because it's a very healthy self perception. Is the author had said that empaths help to clean the energy in an environment. Empaths are like plants. Like plants clean the air, whereas empaths tend to clean the energy in an environment. However, empaths can only do that. We can only go into an environment and kind of bring a high level of healing energy to a place if we have really good boundaries and standards. And that it takes a little while to get our sea legs and to really understand our emotions from other people's emotions and understand to kind of just separate the two, because once we can separate the two, then we can really help uh, empower, because we're empowering ourselves and we're empowering other people. It's not this codependency, which is this kind of like needy clinginess that just really sinks both people. um, I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but I'm going to keep my eyes open for it. So I'm gonna kind of get back to you on that. As far as, do I notice that empaths tend to pick up more of the bad characteristics? John asks, has anyone ever had their ex narcissist try and convince you to be friends after the relationship ended? Oh yes, yeah. I think that's one of the many hoovers that they try, and so it's manipulative people just throw out everything in the book to keep that person under their power and control. And the reality, at the end of the day, you don't owe a manipulative person jack squat. So if a person, as a person who is manipulative, their whole aim is to disempower other people. And so it's really healthy to avoid disempowering people like the plague. So you don't owe them friendship, you don't owe them anything, you don't owe them an explanation, you don't owe them anything, but you do owe it to yourself to take action in a very empowering way and to stay away from them as much as humanly possible. So There is no friendship, because here's the thing, like with friendship, friendship or relationships are based off of, honesty, openness, sincerity, solutions oriented communication. None of those things are possible with a manipulative person. So because none of that's possible, a friendship's not possible, right? So it's sort of like you got to cut bait and just drive on, because there's no working with that. But they'll try to convince you that you can, but you can't, because their actions say otherwise. So okay, let's see. I just looked up. We have 100 people on the live stream tonight. That's so it's so amazing and exciting. Jam, hi Jam. Jam says, my narcissist flat out told me when the relationship was great that he doesn't love. I think it was a slip that allowed me into the real character. I think you are exactly right about that. Um, you know, yeah. So I didn't hear that from either of mine. Although I did hear from Steve's, who turned out to be his wife, not his ex-wife, and I'll call her Molly. Molly had told me, because we began talking after everything kind of came to a head and the truth came out. She had said that his mother had actually pulled her aside at one point. This was like 10 years ago. Had pulled her aside and told her that there was something wrong with him, that he lacked the ability to love. And she thought to herself, well, what a terrible thing for a mother to say. And then over time, she began realizing, yeah, this guy who comes across as Prince Charming and as this fantastic human being, the good times are really good, the bad times are really bad. His behavior is incredibly damaging. So his mom was right. She wasn't being just a hateful mother, she was telling the truth. Hot Potato says, okay, back to the empath question. She says, it worries me because at one point I didn't recognize myself. So that's very, very, very common with codependents, and I think probably with a lot of empaths as well. Before they regain their locus of control, before they regain their power and control, there's this big blurring between ourselves and other people, and especially if we're with a manipulative person who has been so manipulative that we don't have a good sense of self, that they've been controlling over what we're wearing, what we look, our physical appearance, our finances, our spirituality, our reality. So if they've been kind of dictating all of this, it really is kind of just that added level of disintegration of self, to where like we don't know ourselves anymore. Like we don't know what we're about, what we like, what we dislike, what we even look like, because they've molded us into being something totally different. So I think a lot of people, that's a big part of their healing, is to go back through and to start getting clear on who they really are. Like, who are you? What do you like? What do you not like? I encourage people to start going through magazines and cutting out pictures of things that you'd like in your future, and emotions. And so if you see people that are happy, or that are having a dinner party, or people spending time together, or pictures of pets or children, or kind of even things, it's just taking pictures, and just getting an idea of, I like this and this is why, I don't like this and this is why, and just really reconnecting and getting in touch with yourself. So um Pepper says, Jam, I've heard my ex say he could just turn off his love for me like the flip of a switch. Wow. Yes. And so they can, and they do, because they have very shallow emotions. Love for them is about the same as, the saying, I love you, has the same emotional depth of, can you pass the ketchup? Like, it's just kind of just this. like even keel, flat line. Like there's no depth there. Um, Practical Dreamer says, Jam, same here. One of my exes said everything was great. He had no real reason to break up with me, only that he was emotionally unstable and couldn't handle being close to someone. And so that's problematic, right? So, like, even if somebody says that, and even if that's the only, like I say that in quotes, the only red flag that they have, that alone is highly problematic because a person needs to be emotionally stable and emotionally available in order to actually be in a relationship. So if somebody's telling you I'm emotionally unstable and not emotionally available, then that's a sign to get the heck out of there, to not stay around like a lot of us do. A lot of codependent people say, well, we think to ourselves, well, we'll stay and we'll fix them, right? They need us. And of course, manipulative people will get us to buy into that reality of, well, I'm just not as healthy as you, or I'm just not as in tune as you are, or I'm not as kind or giving as you are. And so, you're so lucky you had much better childhood than me, and I'm really damaged. And a lot of us will feel obligated to stay and help get them fixed. But this goes back to when we're dating somebody. This has got to be like an interview process where, and I know that sounds so harsh to so many of you out there, because it would have sounded harsh to me before as well, but you have value. And part of treating yourself with value is only letting other people earn their way into your life, especially into your inner circle. This is not just, any Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo off of the street gets that spot in your inner circle. That's earned over consistent, empowering behavior towards themselves and towards you over a prolonged period of time. It's not done within a week. It's the love bombing, the rushing of intimacy. Healthy people don't do that, and so healthy people don't start that, and they don't get tangled up in it. And so if you're finding yourself getting tangled up with the love bombing and the rushing of intimacy, that's a great signal to say, okay, I need to take a time out because this is not empowering behavior. This is actually really destructive behavior. It feels very good in the moment, but it's short-term thinking. And if you want your life to be drama and chaos free, we have to think more long-term. So we gotta take things slow. Um, Robert says, my narcissist sister and my narcissist cousins will absolutely not admit anything about the abuse in the family. So that's really common. Abuse, victims of abuse, and actually abusers themselves tend to deny it. It's a defense mechanism. It's a really common defense mechanism. It's like it's the whole, like, you can't handle the truth. Like, that's where they're coming from. Like, they can't handle the truth. And so they just find it more convenient to deny it. And again, a lot of people tend to deny or minimize or justify abuse because it's easier to do that for them than it is to actually admit that there's a problem. And then a lot of it, with abusive people, it's next to impossible to actually get closure because they often feel very entitled to act the way that they act. And so getting closure often involves, you've got to get closure and however you need to get closure, realizing that they're probably never going to be accountable or responsible for their behavior, and to accept that they are very limited, damaged human beings, and then drive on, and to not try to get them to see the errors of their ways because they're just never going to see it. It's just sort of like, you've got to do what you need to do in order to stay safe and sane, and by kind of any means necessary. Okay, let's see. Billy Joe says, I told him he's verbally and emotionally abusive right to his face, and he continued to go on like that, like I didn't even say anything. Like he knew and didn't even care that I knew and called him out on it. Yes, that is because he didn't even care and that you called him out on it. because they feel very justified in what they're doing, and in their mind they're not being abusive at all because they feel justified in doing it. So in their mind it's like a child. If they can justify what they're doing, then what they're doing must be okay. And so it's interesting. So like reading different case studies of abusive men, and working at a domestic violence shelter and dealing with the abusive spouses and the women there. The abusive spouses never, it's sort of like in jail, right? Like everybody in jail, if you ask a prisoner, they're always innocent. In their mind, they're the victim. They're the victim of a conspiracy, right? Abusive partners tend to be very much the same way. They have this whole attitude of that they're not abusive. They actually oftentimes paint themselves in the exact opposite light. And so if you listen to them tell it, they're the ones that are kind and compassionate and giving and generous and a good parent and a good spouse. It's their codependent part. It's their real victim that's the problem in their mind. And so this is, you hear this a lot with abuse, of the number one justification for an abusive person is, look at what you made me do. And so that's their mindset of, I wouldn't have to hit you if you wouldn't get in my face right when I got home from work. Or I wouldn't have to yell at you if you did the laundry, right? But it doesn't work that way. So it's, nobody can make another person do something, and they're choosing to have an abusive reaction. And that's not okay. It's never okay. If somebody, yells or screams or doesn't do the laundry or, kind of what have you, it doesn't make any type of abuse okay, ever, period, end of story. That's a justification, that's a minimization, that's a rationalization. That's not a healthy reality to have. So, yes, Peace Pom Pom, great comment. She says, hot potato. Narcissism is very disorienting and confusing, and they distort your understanding of reality. It is totally normal after the relationship to question whether their projections on you are true. Yes. And so, you know, because most partners of abusive people, most victims of abusive people in general, are not aware that they're in an abusive situation, especially if the abuse is coming from family, because they've always grown up with this. Like, this is just their dynamic. They don't know what's healthy or unhealthy. And so when, especially, in a family dynamic, when you've got a parent that's continually telling you that you're the problem, that, and a lot of narcissists will do this. They'll have one child that's the scapegoat, then one child that's the golden child, which, and the reality for the scapegoat is it's totally crazy making, because they can do no right and the golden child can do no wrong. And so the scapegoat child ends up growing up feeling consistently less than, like they have to earn somebody's love. They have to earn, getting their needs met, really, their physical needs or their emotional needs met. And it's a very, very, very destructive mindset. They take on that mindset. They take on that self-perception. They believe their parent when their parent is telling them that, that they're, some form of, stupid, bad, or ugly. And abusive parents, they lash out. They tend to, abusive people in general, they tend to kind of target, one person, maybe like one person at home, one person at work, one friend. It's kind of like one person. Then they focus on that person, and then they just shred them as much as they possibly can until that person's either out of their life in some way, shape, or form, or they lose interest, and then they focus their energy on another person, and they just shred them down. So another term for abusive people is, emotional or energy vampires, and that's exactly why, because that's what they do. But it's really important that you do question the perceptions of their reality, because their reality is not normal reality. It's in a very it's their perception of reality is filtered through the lens of their own very non-existent, very fragile ego. Through their perception of reality is filtered through their own dysfunction, is probably a better way for me to say that. So, it can be very helpful to kind of see, if you have friends, if you have family that you do trust, to get their perceptions of who you are. So, that was something that I struggled with, and I didn't go through, a lot of, really any like emotional. I didn't go through this whole tearing down with Jack or with Steve. So my relationships went from fairy tale to Lifetime TV movie like that. And but it still really, really, really rattled my sense of reality and my perceptions. And because especially with Jack, I'd found out he'd been cheating on me with like dozens, if not hundreds of people. And at the very end, he'd made a comment like, well, could I blame him? And I took that at face value. I'm like, I don't know what I did that was so wrong that would drive him to sleep with all of these people off of Craigslist. And it really destroyed my self-esteem for a really long time. I had a hard time looking in the mirror. I finally had some friends that were like, we need to get you a makeover, because I was dressing really, really frumpy. I just wanted, I guess, and it wasn't a conscious thing. At some level, I just wanted to disappear. I got tangled up with Jack right out of a divorce. That my marriage was, just, my husband was a very good man, but he was not emotionally abusive, but he was emotionally and physically never there. So it was a very lonely marriage, and that's why I got out of it. But so then I went from like this loneliness with my marriage to this intensity with Jack, with this love bombing and everything, to this kind of like loathing that I experienced from him at the end of it. And I had never encountered anybody like that. And so I didn't know what to make of it, except to believe that, yes, there must be something really wrong with me, because he was such a fantastic guy up until that point that I had found that out. So it was very, very confusing. So let's see. Ernie is here. Rediscovering Me is here. Ooh, interesting. Pepper says, Robert, my mother is also a narcissist and an alcoholic. She used to lean in by my ear in public and say things like, wait until we get home. Everyone loved my mother. They had no clue who she is. And Overcoming Understanding says, yes, Pepper, mine too. And so very, very common, for them to have those different masks for different people. And that's what is so confusing for so many victims, and so kind of, it sets the victim up to be re-victimized by other people, because other people don't ever see that side of this abusive person, because abusive people. So the number one tool in an abusive person's toolkit is their power of isolating their victim. And so abuse tends to happen in the dark. It tends to happen in isolation. And so it happens when they're alone with the person, or otherwise behind closed doors, or over the phone, or kind of one-on-one type things where they can justify, minimize, or deny to other people, and other people don't see it. So the number one toolkit for survivors of abusive people is anticipation. So we can anticipate, this is how they operate. This is how they go about with, isolating us, right? And this is how we can avoid it. And this is how we can anticipate their physical response and their emotional response. And now this is how we can anticipate our physical response and our emotional response, and to maintain as much power and control over ourselves as possible. And then so with them, their whole goal is to isolate. So if we can avoid being isolated by them, then we stay a few steps ahead. Robert says, Dana is describing my narcissist mother to a T. It's terrifying when the mask comes off. Yes, it really is. And I'm sure that's gotta be really confusing to be a child and of any age, right? And to think on one hand, here is this person who is my mother, right? My mother. And mothers are supposed to be loving, they're supposed to be nurturing, they're supposed to be kind and compassionate and all of these things. And this woman is really Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and trying to make sense of this. And so, because society also doesn't often understand that women in general can be abusive, let alone a mother to her child, it just kind of doesn't compute for a lot of people. Again, like, how can a mother be abusive to her child? That doesn't make any sense. And so a lot of people will give this kind of well-intended bad advice of, if a person goes no contact with a parent, especially with their mother, it's this idea of, well, but she's your mom, so it's the holidays, and so you need to make amends with her. And the reality is, we don't owe anything to anybody, period. But we definitely don't owe something to a person who's looking to harm us. And so that's not healthy behavior to be around somebody that's hurtful, right? But yes, lots of children of narcissists really struggle with trying to figure out, is it them, is it me, is this really a problem, is this really, is this workable behavior, or can they change, or are they always going to be abusive like this, or are they abusive because they're an alcoholic, or are they abusive because they have stress at work, or are they like, why are they this way? And it can be even more crazy making if the children of the narcissist, if it is that dynamic where one is a scapegoat and the other one is the golden child, because then the scapegoat feels like there's just something wrong with me because my mom just hates me. But it's nothing to do with you. If you're getting the brunt of narcissistic abuse, it's the narcissist has just targeted you. And there's nothing bad or wrong about you. If anything, it's the exact opposite. It's because you are kind and good, and they resent that. And so narcissists, when narcissists have children, they don't have children, they have trophies, is really what it is. And so it's sort of like these like dolls, like they just want them, like this is. And so they have these very expectations of having perfect children because they think they are perfect. And so it's this whole idea of like, well, this is my perfect child, and these are my hopes and dreams for my child, and and my child needs to live up to this. And if they don't, then I will disown them and have nothing to do with them. And so it's this very hard line that children of narcissists have to try to walk. It's incredibly stressful. So True Love says, sort of first realizing that my mother is a narcissist in addition to my ex-boyfriend. I still feel guilty sometimes. My dysfunctional family pushed him away, though, even though he lied and cheated on me. Well, if he, so this goes back to a healthy relationship is founded on openness, honesty, sincerity, and solutions-oriented communication. And lying and cheating does not fall within that. And so if a person's lying to you and cheating on you, that those deal breaker behaviors. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard this, but there's kind of, I don't know where it came from, but this whole idea of kind of what is deal breaker behavior, right? And at the more extreme end of it, there's what's called the 3 A's, and that's abuse, addiction, adultery. So if you've got any of those 3 things going on, those are all deal breaker stuff. Like, get out of there. So, yes, and in my opinion, lying is it's abuse, because it's eroding somebody's reality. It's not, there's no honesty, there's no sincerity, there's no solutions or oriented communication. If you're with a person who's lying, they have a very low emotional intelligence. And it's impossible to have a relationship with a person who has a very low emotional intelligence, who can't face reality. So a relationship is all about facing reality with another person and moving in a direction of growth together, right? Like that's the whole goal of reality. Like you're having a future together. Future means we're growing and changing together. That can only happen in a healthy way if you're with a healthy person and if you're healthy. And so if we're not healthy and we're in a relationship with somebody else, then there's not this level of kind of progression of a relationship. There's actually a level of regression, and so it's dangerous. It's dysfunctional, and it's not good. So I would encourage you to really take some time and examine your empty buckets. Examine kind of you know where your standards are as far as what your expectations are in a partner. Examine what you would consider to be deal breaker behavior, and do some journaling about it and get clear. And then I would encourage you to also start practicing treating yourself with value on a dozen different times a day, to ideally to the point where this is what you do every single moment of the day, but at least a handful of times every single day, practicing treating yourself with value so you get used to that feeling of what it feels to feel good. Because when you get used to that, then you are more aware of what it feels like to feel bad. And you're going to be more inclined to get out of that situation when it feels bad. And so dysfunctional, abusive relationships of any kind. I don't know if you guys have heard the analogy of boiling a frog. So the story is, how do you boil a frog? And the answer is, well, you don't take a frog and throw it in boiling hot water. Because if you do, the frog is going to freak out and it's going to hop out of the pot right away. So instead, what you do is you take the frog and you put it in lukewarm water where the frog is comfortable and it's swimming around and it's kind of having a good time. And you slowly turn the heat up. And then the water temperature is going to get hotter and hotter. And before the frog knows it, it's in boiling hot water. It's in bad trouble and it can't get out. And that's exactly how abusive relationships work. And so abuse starts off. It starts off with emotional abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse. Like I'd mentioned earlier, that physical abuse that most people associate with an abusive relationship, that's like late in the game. That's like late stages of an abusive relationship. A lot of relationships don't ever have any physical abuse. They don't get to that level. So, emotional, verbal, physical abuse, when I say that, I'm talking about minimize lying, minimizing, justifying, rationalizing. Cheating is emotional abuse, psychological abuse. Gaslighting is abusive. You know, Belittling somebody, grinding them down, doing the whole insults wrapped in a compliment kind of thing. So maybe saying something. So like, we'll just use me as an example. So if somebody were to say to me, you know what, I really, normally I really just love tall, thin blondes. Normally I just love tall, thin blondes, but you know what? There's just something about you, and so I'm gonna date you instead. So now it kind of plants the seed within me, right? Of like, well, I'm not tall, thin, or blonde, so you know, now it has the kind of the potential for it's triangulating me with everybody out there that's now tall, thin, and blonde. And so it kind of plants that seed of insecurity. And so that's kind of how they do that. They kind of it's the slow, progressive, insidious type process. So if you're feeling like something's off, it's because something's off. And to again get back in touch with those, like I'd mentioned before, those 9 or 10 in life, right? With people, places, things, ideas, experiences. What feels good? Gravitating towards those things that feel really good, because once you get used to that, you're going to be able to spot things when they don't feel good, and you're going to be able to get out of it. And keep in mind too, a relationship or a friendship or a job or anything really, if if it doesn't have to be abusive for it to not be right for you. So you could be dating somebody, for example, and they are in a lot. I think a lot of people that have gone through an abusive relationship of any kind struggle with this. They'll think, well, here's this person who is so kind and compassionate, and he or she's got a job, and on paper they're a really great person, but there's just not that chemistry. And so then they feel bad. They're like, well, is something really wrong with me? Am I only excited to abusive people, or like what's wrong with me? Well, not necessarily. It's just there's lots of really nice, amazing, awesome people out there that you might not be attracted to, and that's okay. That's just part of dating. And so it's okay. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily anything wrong with you. It just means that they're not for you. So, it don't try to make that shoe fit. If that person's not for you, they're just not for you. And to go spend time with identifying what your 9 or your 10s are, and then you know gravitating towards that. So okay, so let me scroll down and get some more questions here. Bug. Yes. So Pepper says, true love. If your mother is a narcissist, it could certainly explain what led you to a narcissistic romantic relationship. The behavior is familiar to you. So, yes, exactly. And so that here's what's so interesting about this is human beings in general, we tend to have kind of this like internal thermostat. We have like this set point for lots of different things in our life. For really, and that's kind of our standard. So when I say standard, that's what I'm talking about. It's kind of more of this internal thermostat. And it's a subconscious thing, and a lot of it does come from childhood. And so we tend to be attracted to, and possibly even attract, people that'll maintain that thermostat level inside of us. And so we're attracted to not necessarily what's healthy or even what feels good. We're attracted to what's comfortable. And so if we grow up in a home where there is lots of screaming and yelling, that doesn't register. Even if at the time when we were a child we didn't like it, it might not register as problematic as it really is when we're an adult. And so it's not uncommon. This is why, like, this abuse is not just a cycle within that relationship, it's a cycle within a person's life. So if a person was abused as a child, the odds of them being in an abusive relationship as an adult is really, really high. If a person grows up in an alcoholic home, the odds of them becoming an alcoholic or marrying an alcoholic is really, really high. It's sort of just, we gravitate, it's dysfunction. Water seeks its own level. So we date the same level of dysfunction or function as what we are. And so if you're fine, and results don't lie. So if you're looking around in your life and you're like, well, but and I think this is just part of the stage in healing and part of the stage in the awareness of it. And this is something that I really struggled with, because I thought man, out of pretty much everybody that I knew, my boundaries I thought were really pretty good. So I didn't understand, in my situation, how I was getting these problematic people in my life. And but I kept going back to, I know deep down that we, water seeks its own level. So there must be something within me that is matching kind of the whole law of attraction thing. It's matching their level of dysfunction. And so what it there were several things that were dysfunctional with me, and that kind of goes back to the whole empty buckets, and I think you'll find the same. So to examine your own empty buckets. And narcissists, abusive people don't just happen. Well, I should say very rarely happen. And yes, sociopaths can be very charming and convincing. There's a great movie. I think if you guys want to see kind of the pattern of more, maybe like more, and I said in quotes, more mild abuse, kind of what this looks like. The movie How Stella Got Her Groove Back. Okay. This is the way I didn't interpret this movie this way until fairly recently. If you watch this movie, and this is an old movie, it's a love story. It's a feel good love story. And it's going to be oh, I don't want to give a total spoiler alert if you guys haven't seen it, but I want you to pay attention to her ex-husband and his personality. And then if you watch the movie, then pay attention to the new guy, Winston, that she starts dating. And I want you to look for red flags because that movie is full of them. And you won't see it unless, now that you've kind of, I'm guessing, gone through my whole series, which is only actually about half of the red flags. I still am needing to put out more, but you're going to see a lot of the red flags in my series in that movie. And so it's a lot easier to spot problematic behavior in other people. So I think that's kind of the benefit of watching a movie and you're seeing what went wrong. When you are done with that movie, okay, if you decide to watch it, and I think you can even find it, I'm sure, on Amazon or somewhere, come back to YouTube and do a search for, the author's name is Terry McMillan, Terry McMillan on Oprah. And then it'll tell you the follow up of what happened to her after, like, maybe about 7 or 8 years after that movie aired. And then you'll see more of the full picture. But that's a great, her relationships were problematic, but they weren't like big time problematic. So it's kind of laid, just under the radar for a long time. But I think it just shows like just the kind of how people tend to go about picking the same types of problematic partners and not realize it. Okay, overcoming understanding brings up a really great point. She says, I found a guy who treated me the same way that my mother treated me. And so, yes, and that's when we start realizing like, okay, this can't be a coincidence, right? Like there's like some patterns going on here. Like I think it can be really telling if we write down your significant relationships in your life with, your parents, with your best friends over the years, with significant others. And then write down, 3 to 5 of their qualities that you really like about them, and write down 3 to 5 of their most problematic qualities, and see, and do this with all of the relationships, and then go back through and see, are there patterns that repeat here? Because that will help you to see what your vulnerabilities are. So what you liked about them is potentially what your vulnerabilities are. So it's why you ended up befriending them or dating them or marrying them. Okay. And their problematic behavior is what's kind of going on subconsciously. So these are the patterns that you're acting out. And it might help to go back through and you're circling these different traits and you're like, oh my gosh, I am dating this one trait that was in my father or my mother time and time and time and time again. And so once you're able to identify it, you're able to spot it that much sooner, because so much of everything that we do, especially with relationships, is coming from like that subconscious level. I mean, it's something like up to 90% of everything we do on a daily basis is on a subconscious level. So the more that we can bring that to our awareness and to our conscious level, the sooner and the more adept we are at being able to actually address it and change it. Practical Dreamer says, my narcissist had convinced his therapist that we were perfectly normal and that I was the abuser. Um, yes. So they often do that. It's one of the big reasons that I'm really hesitant to encourage people to go into couples counseling with an emotionally abusive person, because by and large, therapy does not make them better. It actually makes them worse. And it really re victimizes the victim because they are, you know, they are master manipulators, and the rest of us don't stand a chance at even winning their game, because they perfect it day in and day out. This is why emotionally manipulative people get worse with age. It's because they just have more time to refine and perfect their manipulations. So if you are with somebody that you think is a narcissist or a sociopath or abusive or otherwise manipulative person, I think it's a good idea, when if you're thinking about getting into therapy, to call, first of all, call a handful of different therapists. Okay, talk to them over the phone right away. You want to see, do you have that, does this therapist feel like a 9 or a 10 for you? What kind of vibe are you getting from this therapist? If you don't feel a connection, or if you feel like, I don't trust him, I don't like him, I didn't click with him, don't go there. It's okay. It's okay to say no. Okay, you're not going to click with everybody. So basing it off of that initial phone call with them, then when you are talking to them, ask them, do you work with clients that are in an abusive or emotionally or psychologically or whatever kind of the dynamic is in your relationship, this type of abusive relationship, and ask them, what is emotional or psychological abuse to you? How do you normally handle this? I have my suspicion. I think I'm in an abusive relationship, but I'm not sure. And see what they say. So a lot of therapists think that they are familiar with abuse, and they're not. And it makes me so angry I could just spit nails. Like I can't even tell you. Uh, oh. So a lot of them are not familiar with emotional abuse. They might have had maybe touched on it for half of a class during their education. So they really don't know what abuse is, and or they have the very naive and ignorant mindset that everybody has the capacity to change, even though the person's attitudes and their actions are pointing otherwise. So if you get a bad therapist, and I say bad, I don't mean bad. If you get an unskilled therapist who is not familiar with abuse, and again, a lot of them aren't, doesn't mean that they're bad therapists. It just means that that's not their strong suit. It's not their, and different therapists are good in different ways. So I don't mean to, knock a whole profession there, but if it's really easy to get re-victimized by a therapist who thinks they know what they're doing and they don't know what they're doing. So to really kind of interview them, because you're opening up yourself and your life, and you're spending time and money working with them in therapy. So it's really important that you find a therapist that you think can get you, help get you and guide you to the results that you're wanting. So because that is really, really common. And so for a lot of victims, they do stay in therapy thinking now that they are the abuser, and it's when they get out of those dynamics, it's just that added layer of craziness that they need to untangle and figure out, like, what is real. Jam asks a fantastic question. Why aren't there any laws against narcissists? Just because they manipulate you to kill yourself doesn't mean they're not guilty of pushing you over the edge. Well, yeah. So I think in large part, emotional and psychological abuse is hard to prove, because, like we talked about before, abuse happens in the dark. It happens in isolation, and so it's generally like that one person that's experiencing it where nobody else is. And so if a person is trying to prove abuse or neglect, this is especially helpful if a person's going through a divorce with a narcissist, or is trying to take this person to court to actually, get justice in some way, shape, or form. It's really helpful to have as much of a paper trail as possible, because with physical abuse, there's generally physical marks, right? There's bruises, there's cuts, there's scrapes, there's scratches, there's bite marks. Emotional, psychological abuse, it's really hard to prove that. So keeping text messages, keeping emails, keeping voicemails, keeping screenshots of different things that they're saying on Facebook or Instagram or kind of what have you is really really important in improving abuse. I think it's the UK that actually just recently passed a law against emotional abuse, which it's going to be very interesting to see how all of this comes out to play, and how they're able, because they're going to be kind of, this is brand new territory, so they're going to be really setting the precedent for kind of how all of this goes down. So it's exciting in a lot of ways to see you know emotionally abusive people brought to light and bringing this discussion to the table and hopefully being held accountable. But a lot of them are slippery like jello, so it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be really tough to actually convict somebody of this. um yeah. Yeah, Pepper, that's really a great comment, and really validating. So thank you for saying that. Pepper says, Robert, so sorry for what happened to you. It's sad and lonely when people don't believe you. You feel alone. Your mother is supposed to protect you. It's scary as a child looking up at a parent. So yes, yes, it is. And, you know, it is. So, Robert, you are not alone. In many different ways, you're not alone. There's tons of men that go through abuse. There's tons of men, unfortunately, right? But it's sort of like with, I think, this, all of these different survivors of abuse, and with these different channels and support groups and everything, it's sort of like it's kind of the group that nobody really wants to join, but they're glad that there are so many members, kind of a thing. So I think there's comfort in knowing that you're not alone, that you're not crazy, that it's not you, and that you can heal from this. So that's kind of the great thing I think about interacting with other people that have gone through this, and everybody's in different stages of healing. To just know that there is life after this, things do go on. So Cecilia says, "This has made me feel like I need to be in a psych hospital. It's been a roller coaster ride from hell." So I think a lot of people feel like that too. I think a lot of people actually do end up checking themselves into a hospital of sorts, either psych or emergency room, because they're having panic attacks, they're having nightmares, they're not sleeping, they're not eating, they're not functioning, they don't know why. There's a lot of re-victimization and invalidation from other people. They don't understand. It's very very crazy making. So I can't recommend support groups enough. That is just, it's so, to me it just felt like just a glass of ice cold water, and I'd been in a desert for years. I really thought it was just me. And then getting into these support groups, and hearing all of these versions of the same, different versions of the same story, it was just the weirdest. It was just like, what in the holy hell is going on? I had no idea. I was blown away, blown away. And so support groups are really great for that. Support groups, the cool thing too with online support groups is they're 24/7. So there's generally always people in there. So you're not alone in this, and you know, um, you can get through this. You can get through this. And everybody is healing a little bit more every single day. So just take the time to be extra good to yourself during all of this. And so there's certain things that you can do. So like for example, and I know this sounds, maybe like I'm kind of minimizing things, and I'm definitely not, but cutting out caffeine really makes an ocean of difference if you're having a lot of anxiety and panic attacks. There's YouTube videos that are relaxation. I think Jason Stevenson is the guy. I'm not sure. Fantastic guided imagery, relaxation, stress reduction videos, to listen to that before you go to bed. Taking time to laugh, watching stand up comedy on YouTube, finding things that that are enjoyable. All of that kind of fits into self-care and being extra extra good to yourself right now because you've gone through a lot. You've gone through a lot, and just acknowledging that, and just, being your own best friend and just loving yourself. This is part of loving yourself, and just having faith that it does get better. So, and at the end of the day too, just know, if you really feel like that you are needing to go into the hospital, that you're just not functioning, there's no shame in that either. You need to do what you need to do in order to stay safe and sane. So, oh, Blue Lightning says, shout me out, please. So, hi, Blue Lightning. Welcome. Great. Pepper says, Jam, there was a story about a girl who convinced her best friend to kill himself through texts. She actually was charged. And so, yes, there was another story I read recently. Oh, it was awful. I mean, what the hell is the matter? People are just disgusting sometimes. There was another story like that where a guy who was actually supposedly working at like a suicide hotline was pushing people to kill themselves. And that, again, if there's more of a paper trail, if there's text messages, if there's things like that, then it's a lot easier to convict somebody of pushing somebody to commit suicide. I think a lot of suicides in general, male or female, do tend to come from as a result of of abuse. So it's, and I think a lot of victims internalize kind of because they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand that they've been abused. They know that something's probably wrong, but they do take on their abusive this other abusive person's reality as the truth, as their own reality. And so it compounds. They already have low self-esteem, and it compounds this whole really toxic identity that they're now taking on, that thinking that they're, stupid, bad, and ugly, and all these things, and they're grinding themselves down to where they feel so worthless that they are driven to suicide. And the sick thing is, with narcissists just soak that up because it makes them feel even more important, of like, look what I can do. And of course, it also gives them the thrill of, well, now they get to play the victim card too. Like, oh, how tragic, you know, um, my child or my spouse committed suicide, and poor me, and everybody rallies around them. So it's just, they're very, very sick people. Okay, so we're gonna call it a night here in about 5 minutes. Okay. Skip down. Amy says, hello, everyone. Hi, Amy. Hey, Martine is here. I was just thinking about you. You've got really good timing there. Let's see. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling down. Okay, that's a great comment. John asks, that's the thing. I just can't comprehend. My ex narc, who's a woman, she's someone who's so beautiful, innocent, sweet, and funny. And how can she be so destructive? And that is, I think, what a lot of us get tangled up with, is how can, it's the whole Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde dynamic. And so, they just have these different sides of themselves, and their abusive nature comes out you know, maybe it's the kind of their coping mechanism when things don't go well, or but really, like, the main driver, it's power and control over other people, over um, these things. So um, it's hard. It's hard to walk away and let go, and I think that's why people stay in it, because we all have this idea of abusive people, of looking like abusive people. So we kind of think like, well, abusive people must look scary and mean and intimidating, and they often don't. Especially, and it's especially tricky for society to view women as abusive, because it's sort of, especially if she's beautiful and likable and petite, right? So it doesn't compute. Like, how can she be abusive? But it's a mindset, and it's that power and control mindset. That's what makes that person abusive, and that mindset is in any gender, any age, anybody. So, but it's hard for victims, because they're like, well, is this person, do they just have some issues? Can it be worked? Like, what's workable and what's a deal breaker? And I think a lot of people get stuck in trying to figure that out. And that's why I encourage people, um, the way that that is, it's finding a person, if they need to have open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. If those four things are not there, and they're not interested in those four things being there, then in my book, that's a deal breaker. So if they're the opposite of that, so I said open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented. So if they're not honest, if they're a liar, if they're not open, meaning they're closed, right? So they're withholding, they're gaslighting, they're spinning, they're minimizing, they're denying. Sincere, so if the opposite of that is insincere, which is manipulative, and solutions oriented, the opposite of that is, it's manipulative. So they're not solutions oriented, they're power and control oriented. So if they're not open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented, and they're in fact the exact opposite, those exact opposite behaviors, those are a signal that that is deal breaker stuff. So, and I encourage people, and I get it. Like, if a person's married or if they're family, it's not always so easy to just walk away. If a person's going to get into therapy, I encourage them, get an idea in your mind before you go into therapy of what kind of changes you need to see, what kind of time frame you're looking at, and how much money you're willing to spend. And so that way, this going in, of what needs to happen, and in a time frame that it needs to happen in. And that way, if it doesn't happen, like, okay, well, this is what I said, this is what's going on, this is, now I'm okay with actually just drawing a line in the sand and then walking away. Because even if a person, I mean, change is hard for anybody. Even if we really want to change is hard. So, let alone a person who is not motivated to change. That's kind of whole, like, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, kind of thing. So, you can bring a narcissist to therapy, but there's no guarantee that it's actually going to make anything better. Oh, I love that. Okay, wait, I need to scroll up. I just looked up and saw a really fantastic comment. So, True Love says, I hope to come back here one day with a success story. How I rebuilt my life, I filled my buckets, and a plus would be to find a healthy romantic relationship. I love that. I love that. So um, let's set that as a goal, because it's totally doable. It is totally doable. So, um, yes. And in the meantime, I would love to hear from you. I think everybody else would as well, to give us status updates along the way, as far as like how you're rebuilding your life, what your new life looks like, what you're doing to fill your buckets. We want to share those victories with you along the way. So keep us posted, and it'll be fun. It'll be fun to watch you rebuild your life. So, yes. And I will say too, one of the biggest things that helped me with, rebuilding my life, was really starting off with, by making the decision that I was not going to give either of these relationships the power to ruin my life. Like that was kind of this like stop loss, like this decision of, okay, like, because before I was all over the place emotionally. I'm like, I didn't know if I was going to have a breakdown or a breakthrough or simply break. Like, I just didn't know where I was in that whole like emotional spectrum, and then realizing I'm not going to give this the power to ruin my life. So like that option of like my life being ruined, totally off the table. So if that's off the table, then what do I have left? And then I have, okay, well, then I can either have a mediocre life where I'm just more of a survivor of this, or I can become a thriver and I can go forward and I can make this something that's one of the best things that ever happened to me. That was the decision that really steered a lot of my behavior. And then I moved forward, decided I'm not only going to make this one of the best things that's ever happened to me, I'm going to make this one of the best things that's ever happened to other people. And then really just talking to God or the universe, kind of whatever you want to call it, and just be like, this is what I want to do. I need some help. Put me to work. Let's do this. And then just connecting with that power within myself and within, God or source or the universe, whatever you want to call it, really, really, really helped me to kind of get pointed in this direction. So I would encourage you to make empowering decisions, make empowering choices. You definitely can heal from this. There's a lot of lessons. There's a lot of, I mean, I know it sounds terrible, but there's a lot of gifts buried deep in the rubble of abuse. And there's a lot of personal growth that happens. There's a lot of, just a lot of really intense, amazing things that can happen that probably would not have happened any other way. So, just know that. So, yes, okay, I love that. So, True Love says, "Oh my goodness, yes. I want to take that option of my life being ruined off the table. Yes, I want to be a thriver." So, I love it. Um, Dawn says, "Yes, I now say that my narc was my greatest teacher." Um, yeah, I would agree. John says, "Dana, narcs won't go to therapy, but they want to become a therapist." A lot of them do, and it's so weird to me too how they can not only go through like becoming a therapist, go through, most therapists, most masters in social work or licensed professional counselors, they go through about 2,000 hours of supervised counseling where they have a mentor who's kind of guiding them. How their personality disorder goes undiagnosed that whole time absolutely scares the crap out of me, because that to me shows like there's like big problems, like, and then how they're able to actually sit for their licensure and pass this, and they are an emotionally abusive person, and that just like falls under the radar, is there's something really wrong. So um yeah. um yes, okay, True Love says, "Yes, Dana, I heard that you could make a vision board or list out the types of things you want to accomplish to get you to that place." So yes, and here, you know what? Hold tight real quick. I'm gonna go grab my vision board. I'll be right back. Ooh, okay. So this is my updated vision board. And I do these on a regular basis. This is not like the most well assembled thing. So these are just different pictures of things that I would like in my life in this next chapter. So I should probably take this up. This is a cute butt. I would like a cute butt. So I have this picture on there. That is not my butt, by the way. That's the tush I wish I had. So this picture over here is a house that is off the grid. It's just really simple. That would be like my dream house. And this is a picture of a house that's on a lake with a dog, and it's just real simple. Just simple house, simple, kind of like my life. And then just a picture of a dinner party with friends. I really liked that. Here's a picture of an indoor garden. Here's another picture down below of an indoor garden. Greenhouse. I would love to grow my own food year round. I want to write. I'm working on some books with all of this. I'd love for my books to be best-selling books. I want to eventually write my own story. And then Cheryl Strayed, who's one of my heroes, wrote her own story. And you probably have seen, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but it's her story of kind of finding herself again. So there's the button for YouTube. I would love for my channel to grow really big and to get the message out as much as possible. There's a picture of people around a light bulb, and this picture is just signifying just a bunch of people coming together around great ideas and just connecting. And again, cute tush. And then I liked this picture. I like her hair. I like her bangs. And she just seems very confident. And I like that. And that's something that I'm trying to cultivate more within myself. So that's my vision board. And I have it in my living room, and I look at it every single day when I'm eating breakfast or dinner or writing or kind of what have you. And I just got those pictures off of the internet, and I emailed them to my local Kinko's and had them print them out in color. And it cost me like, I don't know, $10 or something for all those images, and posted them up. So it can be vision board stuff can be really, kind of depending on where you are in the healing process, it can really encourage people to move forward. And here's the thing with change is there's no such thing as small change. So if you have an idea of that you want to be organized, right? Like this is kind of these traits that you want to have in your life. Or you want to have an indoor greenhouse. Like those are some pretty spectacular indoor greenhouses. You can do something like just start small. Just have a very small herb garden, or in your kitchen, or if you want to have dinner parties with friends, that's something that you could do this weekend, even if you only have one other person over. Or you can join meetup groups and do that. Or with getting organized, this is something that I did. I was starting to take back control of my life, thinking like, I want to bring my highest and best self out, right? So I was going through my house, like organizing like crazy. I was just pouring all of this like anxious energy into making my life better. So I would clean out my car, I would vacuum it, I would get it washed, I would clean out my junk drawer, I'd organize my closet. And it was sort of like my way of trying to, I guess, it's a whole like emotional alchemy. So I was having all of this negativity and anxiousness, and I was trying to transform it into something that was really positive and productive. And that really helped me a lot. So, just, let's see. Diana asks, "Hey Dana, can you make a video about the mistake of making your life revolve around your ex-narc?" So yeah, I can definitely do that. Let me write this down. Video mistake. Life revolving around narc. Okay, so babe, we're gonna do two more questions, then we're gonna call it a night here. So I gotta get to bed. Oh, Kevin's here. Hi, Kevin. And we've got the triple, I don't even know, 10-0 person here. So, hi, zeros. Baby Doe asks, is it possible to become a narcissist due to narcissistic abuse? So, yes, it is. That generally happens in childhood, but it can. A lot of codependent people tend to pick up narcissistic traits. They tend to just rub off on the person. It's kind of this whole dysfunctional way of relating to other people, and so that you know um, that like that dysfunctional dynamic, the dysfunctional communication, the dysfunctional coping skills, the dysfunctional way of relating to other people, the dysfunctional way of relating to ourselves, all of that can rub off on a person. However, the good thing is if you're aware that there is a problem, if you've got some wrinkles in your personality, again, which we all have, but you're highly motivated to change them, then I fully believe that you can. So the problem with narcissists isn't that they're necessarily narcissistic. The problem is that they're not open or willing to change. It's the rigidness of their personality that's the problem. So if you're open to change, then there's not really a problem there. Then you can change. So it might take, I don't even want to say that it might take time, because I think really change, if we're highly motivated enough, change can happen in an instant. So finding a good therapist who's familiar with codependency, who's familiar with narcissistic abuse, or you might want to use the terms like more like emotional abuse or psychological abuse, that can help you kind of get rid of a lot of these negative traits that you absorbed. Can definitely be a great first step in that. Support groups too, I always really recommend those, because you're surrounded by a bunch of other people that have been there, done that. And coda groups, so codependent anonymous groups, they meet in person. There's also tons of these groups online. Maybe joining a few support groups of both, so like narcissism support groups and codependency support groups. There's tons of them on Facebook. I have my own. Mine is narcissistsupport.com/forum on my website. But joining those kinds of groups is a really, really great way to get support 24/7, and that's kind of the added benefit of that. Even if you're in therapy, it can just be just that added validation and the feedback. So yes, Jennifer says, true love. The cool thing about building from scratch is a clean canvas. It's not easy, but you get to start from the ground up. Yes, 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 yes. And my guess is that you are probably like a lot of us, when we've had our life blown to pieces with narcissistic abuse. We start really realizing how much wasn't working, and how much probably we did need to have not in our life anymore, like friendships, maybe jobs. We needed to have a change that we were resisting for a long time. And so I would talk about my own life. I had a friend of mine tell me, as I kept referring it to him, like, my life has been blown to pieces. I feel like I'm walking. I feel like it's like the end, like this apocalypse, and I'm walking around, and I'm all alone, and my life is just rubble. Like, there's just rubble all around me. And I had a friend way back when tell me, he's like, the benefit of having your life blown apart, blown to pieces, is that you get to choose the pieces of which you want to rebuild with. And that just struck me as the same, like, just so profound, and so it gave me hope, because I was really kind of getting stuck in this feeling of, I just felt like a victim. I didn't know how to move forward, and nobody understood me, and I felt so incredibly alone. And then just realizing, oh, like, I can rebuild. Like that hadn't even really crossed my mind for a while there. Like, oh, okay, I can rebuild. Oh, I can heal from this. Oh, wait, what? Like, this could actually be something good in my life. Like, all of those things, it took me a while to realize that. So that's why I want people to understand, like, you can really move forward from this. Like, it's, you're not crazy. you can heal and you can move forward. So I mean that, like, with every ounce of my being, because people are, I did it, and there's nothing, honestly, like, there's nothing special or unique about me. It's just I had, some different realizations along the way. The whole realization of, I'm not going to let this ruin my life, and I'm going to get busy making this one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Like, I think if a person can adopt like those two mindsets, even if you don't know how to make either of those things happen, even if, I mean, because when I had those realizations, I was at such a low point in my life. Like, if I was showering, like, that was a good day. So, just making those declarations to yourself, I'm not going to let this ruin my life, and I'm going to take this and make it one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Just making that declaration out loud to the universe really helps to steer your thinking and steering your actions into making that happen, even on a subconscious level. And I think you'll find that it really supercharges your healing, because your brain's going to be looking for ways to make this work in your favor. And then you adapt that mindset, that thriver mindset of, I'm going to squeeze out as much as I humanly possibly can from this experience, and I'm going to make it work for me, and I'm going to make it work for other people as well. So, okay, guys, it is late and I have got to get to bed. Um, and from what I understand, it looks like the conversation here, the chat keeps going. So, obviously, you guys keep going. And uh, for those of you that are interested in joining a support group, like I said, I would encourage you to join a handful of different ones so you can find out which ones resonate the most with you. There's lots of them on Facebook. If you do go to join a support group on Facebook, keep in mind that if you join a closed group, so like my group is closed, lots of them are closed. If you join a closed group, other people can see that you've joined this group, but they can't see what you're saying unless they also join that group. So a lot of people will start fake Facebook accounts and join groups under their fake Facebook account for that reason. So, and if they're being watched by their ex narcissist, or they've got friends that are like mutual friends, they don't have to worry about other people infiltrating their support group. They just join under a fake name. Or you can join my website, which is narcissistsupport.com, and then there's a tab that says support group, or slash forum, FORUM, and that'll take you to my support group there, which it's as anonymous as you want it to be. So just use a different name. But support groups are incredibly helpful. So that's what I got for you. Good night. Good night, guys. Good night, Adrian. Good night, True Love. Good night, all of you. And so take care. Lots of love to you guys. So, you are not alone, you are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So you guys take care, and I will see you next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, unless I see you on the support group before then. So, take care. Have a great night. Bye.